Two, one. Hi there. Well, she's back. It's the one and only SSP survivor and amazingly beautiful healer, Rebecca Rose. Welcome, Rebecca, my love. How you doing?
Oh, Danny, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here again. Yeah.
It's so good to see you. It's been quite the ride over the years. We've both been doing many different things, and you just continue to shine and glow wherever you be. And what I would love for us to do is for us to kind of go into like early memories when you started awakening to the fact that you actually had been used in very different ways in the SSP, the Secret Space Program. And I will tell you that with all of the many, many SSP survivors I have interviewed over the years, your story is one of the most compelling and stressful and horrifying. And that's saying a lot because a lot of people have suffered hugely in the SSP. So please take your time and share with us what feels good for you.
Mm. Thanks, Danny, for the introduction. I know people have, some of your audience is familiar with my story, and maybe not so much. I don't know. But all of this, I mean, it happened as if in long ago time. I was born in 1972. So, when I was taken just before 10 into the long 20 and back, we could say it's a different era of the programs, and yet it's so pertinent to how we've been kind of mind mastered over the years. So, I had memories of early abductions with the reptilians to the moon and things that were going on in my natal family and with my godfather extended family. Deep trauma in these areas. I was trafficked into child pornography very early on at the hands of my godfather, who worked for the deep state. My father worked for the deep state. Lockheed Martin, Naval Intelligence. He was a subcontractor with NASA and the CIA. I learned a lot about his work just before he died in 2025. So, all this to say, why my spotlight on the family there for a minute. I always kind of say, like, my father's in some ways very responsible for me ending up in the programs and these abductions. He was also star-seeded. He also, had his own experiences that I learned about when I read his journal. So this is sort of, and my brother was taken into the SSP as well, he's 4 years older. So there was a lot that was already set up in the family, let's say, that I chose at a soul level to incarnate into. So there's a lot of if we look at the, I think what I'm getting at, Danny, is the context of this. It wasn't random. This was kind of scripted before I came in. And for me as a soul to come in and get at deep into experientially and firsthand the belly of the beast, so that, as I've said before, I could be part of its undoing. Um, I wouldn't be here talking about these things and resourced for this, I think, if I hadn't kind of had a bigger, let's say, a bigger mission or a plan before I came in. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm going to pause there just for a moment. I don't know how much to include before. I was taken to I'll include a spot here about, being abducted. These smaller abductions, so to say, started when I was about 4 years old, again with reptilians. I was taken to the Nakluathan base on the moon repeatedly. It was almost like going to a night job. I didn't understand as a child that, my night terrors and paralysis and those things were not ordinary experiences, all the nosebleeds and waking up with my head at the foot of the bed and these things. Like, I didn't know when I started coming back into these memories and really looking at them, like, that those are really hallmarks of abduction experiences. I was very green. I didn't know anything about this ET world
Yeah,
at all.
well,
And I'd stuffed away a lot of my memories for so many years. Like, I couldn't look at things that I knew. Yeah.
wow. Can I ask you about if you're happy to go into just for people that have never heard of these kinds of events that are very real and very, very true, and our governments globally have known about them for absolutely decades and decades. So you say at 4 years old, you remember being taken to the moon, to the reptilian center. Tell us the name again. Tell us where the name came from, and what did the reptilians look like?
Yeah, so it was actually German based, and yet at the same time, I would say, at least in my experience in the programs, wherever the Draco are, they're kind of the top dog. So we could say it's a German, German, yeah, enterprise up there. And this was a lot of, I don't know any other name for it other than there was what I recall is Nazi insignia and German people, some Greys, and also the Draco. And again, the Draco were the main interface I had with this sort of night job. My abduction experiences up here, and they were not as there's a hierarchy within the Draco, you know, culture, let's say, and different subgroups of race as I experienced it. So those that owned me out in the Kuiper Belt much later, much later than this, were definitely bigger and energetically scarier than those who were working with the Germans on the moon. At the time, I was being used as a sort of psychic interface with beings they had in the hybrid labs there. So um, I was sort of stealing genetic information, taking a screenshot almost with my child's mind. And this was training for the SSP, things that would be built out in me and come online later. Part of the reason they had me was to um, do these sort of introductory level jobs, but to learn that they own me, that I was not to be a sovereign being, that I was going to be owned by the Germans, the Greys, the Draco, whatever regressive group would, be in control from one abduction to the other, but learning that I lacked sovereignty and that I would be obsequious or obedient, accommodating of whoever wanted to do whatever with me. So that's a little bit of that story. At the time, again, this is going back to the 70s, that there was a huge genetic hybrid lab cloning, all kinds of experimental. I don't even have the words for it because it's so aberrant. It's so anomalous. It's so deviant. But all kinds of experiments they were doing with different genetics and DNA harvesting in a lab. And this was also at the time connected to Dulce. So there's a lot right there. And we haven't really even gone into the long, 20 and back where became a super soldier. But this is all sort of setting the stage for like little Rebecca to then become 9 years old and abducted after being twinned with another little boy we were taking to Mars. So I've run through a lot there. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah. Again, as people are trying to map their own trauma, or at least at the very least, understand someone like you of what's happened to you. The 20 and back program, a lot of people don't know what that means, but you said you were twinned with another child. Can you tell us the reason that that happened and happens, and what Dulce
Yeah.
is for those that don't know?
Yeah. So the twinning, boy, it's a trauma-based mind control process when they're twinning you as a child with someone else. We can look back into the experiments of Dr. Mengele in Auschwitz in the 1940s to know that the twins are very valuable when they're biological, but the darker forces, let's say, had learned how to um, twin non-biological children and to make them psychically connected so that they could work as a team and gather intel and be heightened in their abilities more than we could be working singularly and solo. Um, it was sick and sadistic how this was accomplished. Again, remember, this is a trauma-based mind control technology that would, again, kind of fractures the child so that they are um, compliant and able to be as if an empty vessel to be filled and programmed in a certain way later on. In this case, like I said, what would be commonly called a super soldier. So this little boy, Dean, and I were abducted to the underground base north of Chicago. It's Great Lakes Naval Station, the largest naval training center in the country. And I don't know how, but it was seemingly important that they make us go through this 20 together on Mars as psychic super soldiers, so to say. I don't know if it's a bit of a label that I don't love because we were slaved and we were not free beings and we were still children when we were taken there. So that's a little soundbite on the twinning. It's grotesque what was done, and I don't know that this is still something that they do to people to get, using children to uh, they use kids because we are so pliant. Our energy centers are very open, especially with certain children who are empathic, sensitive, intuitive. they want these kids for a lot of devious ends. At least that's my experience personally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about Dulce at the time, again, back in the 1970s. Um, Dulce Base was really run by the Greys, and it was a huge, again, a genetics lab for them in cooperation with some of the alphabet agencies. And this was in Dulce, New Mexico. Ironically, I lived in that area of the world for almost 20 years without having full recall of all these memories. But I can see why I gravitated there almost, um, yeah, almost as if my psyche was trying to wake me up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it possible to turn your audio up a little bit? You did go loud there for a second, which was much better. I know we've had a couple of interruptions already.
Yeah, that was strange. It was all the way up and then it's gone down. I'm not sure why.
Yes, it's crazy, isn't it? Someone's actually turning you down, Rebecca. Uh, Madness. So a lot of people that have
I
come
just unplugged my external
that
mic, so I think it might be better without that. Let me try it without
that's
the better
perfect.
one.
That's
Okay, we'll do
great.
this.
Great audio,
Okay.
great audio. To
Yeah.
those that have come to my channel over these many years and have heard many different testimonies, we have covered a lot of the very unfortunate and graphic child harming techniques, which are also used on adults in prisons. So you can imagine every level and layer of horror that should never happen to a being was happening to the children, including waterboarding, water torture, and other elements that no child or adult should ever endure. So unless you
Yeah.
want to share more on that side of things, you mentioned Mengele, also known as Dr. Green in the
Yeah.
programs. I've met various people again who've been here. I brought on Dr. Julia Engel. Have you met her yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
what a beautiful lady. She is somebody who was in the very first mind control programs after the war. And she was
Oh,
used
wow.
at, yeah, San Diego, where
Hmm.
I used to live too, right down by the Mexican border. And San Diego
Yeah.
is 12 miles from Mexico, Tijuana. And she's been on my channel a couple of times and she'll be coming back and she's shared a lot of the initial beginnings. There were the Nanny Blacks that were actually men called Nanny Black. There were the Dr. Greens and the Dr. Whites. Mengele was
Mm.
also known as Dr. Green at one time. Do you have memories of names that were used in the programs?
No, I don't. I don't. I have a lot of my memories don't come with, I have a lot of, it's not like it was this program or this, it's not always with names. It's, a lot of deep memory, but without, you never go to, like, for example, with an underground base, you don't always know exactly where you are as a memory is returning. It's not like there's a neon sign that tells you. So sometimes it is very clear. Like I'll have something open up about, I finally recognized the connection between the moon and Dulce. And it took me a while to understand that. That came through very psychically and clearly the operating of the jump gate between the, German base on the moon and Dulce itself here on Earth in New Mexico. There was a gate that a child's frequency, let's say the frequency of innocence, and the needed that to get some of what we could call cargo through those gates. Um, yeah, but to your point, I didn't have always like a sense of where I was or who owned me at the time. At times I did, at times I didn't. And when we go to Mars, I don't remember Germans. I remember American military largely and corporate interests handling me as well as mantis beings. So yeah, there's so much
Mantid,
there.
mantid beings on Mars.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the jump gate looked like and what it felt like to go through it?
Yes, I love that question because here's why it was so odd in my memory when it was coming back to me, like, wow, this feels a lot like what I have learned about Dulce over the years. Like, because it was so seamless, it was almost like I've said this before in other interviews. It's like walking from your, kitchen into your bathroom. You almost don't know that you're moving from one dimensional frequency or one space-time location into another. It was quite uh, I think it was meant to be that way, but it was a jump case like in a in a soundbite, and this is oversimplifying all the technology, but it's like compressing space and time. So it's so interesting that it's an enormous space, a gate in one sense in the quantum field, but you know, a small chamber in another sense. So it's vibrationally shifting, and reading energy. So it's reading the energy. I don't know if I said that right. Sometimes linear language, English, all other linear language sometimes fails to describe what is very quantum and multidimensional in nature. So it asks us as we retrieve our memories to really take big leaps into trusting what we know, and also the audience who maybe isn't familiar with all these things. So I didn't, to your point, I didn't know exactly that I was moving through this jump gate as a child, and I think that was to keep me from knowing or being afraid. It's almost like going into a little room, and it's more like the sensation, not the visuals of what this looked like, but the oscillation, the torsion fields, and the things that were operating within this moment in time and space, jump gate, to traffic cargo from Dulce back up to the moon in this case. Yeah.
And when you refer to cargo, are you referring to other human beings, other children,
I'm
and
referring to body parts, endocrine system secretions, hybrids, clones, all manner of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of blows my mind to recollect that, and the smell and the moaning and the things we don't need to speak of necessarily. Um, it's like things that there's so many elements of this, moments and memories that once you see them, you don't unsee them. And maybe that's a good thing. I've gotten my memories back in many ways that will be a continual process until I'm, a little old lady with gray hair. So many memories and remember, I was cloned out there too. I know this sounds amazing and preposterous, but yes, that also happened. So it's almost like retrieving memories from not just 20 years, but from let's say, other incarnations and iterations lived as clones too. So it's quite again, so quantum in nature, it can be difficult to describe in English. Yeah.
very difficult to put into words the reality of the lives that you've lived so far. So, at the point where Dulce was literally manufacturing humans, what a dreadful term, but that's a reality, completely void of compassion, love, and care, trafficking beings and like they're animals, like they're sheep and cows and all the rest of it. What was the point of transporting humans and body parts and adrenochrome and all the rest of it to the moon?
This was to be would eventually be traded off world. So through the galactic slave trade, a lot of what was, to clarify, a lot of what was going on with the Greys, there was a piece of that was for their own amusement, their own perceived betterment. They had, almost like a hall pass from the dark shadow government to be doing this. But so some of it was, the point I'm making, that some of this was kept for the Greys. Let's just make that simple terminology. But another part was to be sold off world. So this would go back to the top side or dark side of the moon, off of this Earth, and thence on beyond into other races, bargaining and bartering and trading. The galactic slave trade was huge back in this era when I was taken into the programs, and I incarnated from what I call just the Light Alliance, my family on a Syrian ship up there. We wanted to know what was going on in this quadrant of the galaxy in the solar system with the galactic slave trade. And so that was a very deeply connected, a long answer to your question about Dulce and what was coming out of there and where was it going. It was being traded.
So you mentioned your Syrian family from Sirius, a star system. Some people call it the dog star too, don't they? The Sirius, the three. Is that
Oh,
correct?
the dog star, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So what is your memory of your star family?
It's present and living. I have a very deep connection. They've called themselves as a subsidiary group to one of the galactic confederations, and there are many groups, that are um, light aligned within this area of reality. Yeah. But The ship itself is Syrian built, but it's a crew of mixed race. There's a variety of other beings. The commander there, Nicodemus, as know to call him, is uh, gentle. He's a harmonizer, and he's dark-skinned, humanoid. There's lots of different beings, and we picked up refugees over time and this and that. But just to say that I view them as family, and when I didn't remember them really deeply. I had kind of connection in childhood that was lost, and then when all these memories started coming back, I realized at the same time I was taken into the SSP, part of my, I want to say, lack of better term, like my soul was taken back to the pod on the ship and preserved so that I could come out the other end and survive and even thrive after this, and gather some of those memories back. Um, and I think it's helped me to, I think they helped me not lose my mind or, succumb to suicidal ideation or self-harming in the aftermath of recollecting my SSP experiences. I've been able to metabolize this and actually come back into my wealth of abilities, which is part of the reason they took me, right? And now work as a psychic, intuitive seer, channel, and healer. So that's a beautiful thing. And this all connected to understanding, I think, the deeper soul mission. When we talk about how do you heal all of this, trauma and suffering, understanding the bigger picture for me was very, very key. And that I had a plan, that this was not my first incarnation, that I came in to learn certain things. And this is, not staying in, and I could have easily stayed in like a mode of being a victim, but moving beyond that to understand what my soul is getting at. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. You're one of those people too that, when you talk, I always can feel the resonance. It makes me kind of emotional. You're
Mm.
just one of these very gifted, loving beings. It's unmistakable, the vibrancy that comes from you, the genuine, because we can all mimic, we can all pretend. There are those
Mm.
that do. There's somebody I would love to send you for healing, but I know that person
Mm.
would never go. That person would rather go in a med bed, for example, but that's still not
Mhm.
taking care of the heart. And this is,
Yeah.
as the human, the gift of the human is to get right with that heart and that soul and the
Yeah.
spirit. And it's sad to me
Mm.
that people that bypass that, because that's part of the whole reason why we came. And like you said, that your Syrian family and the work, I've heard of Nicodemus. I know that name. That's so interesting. That when you said it, you
Well,
said Nicodemus, didn't you?
yeah. 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 So thanks for mentioning the heart, by the way. And we should talk about meditation, how my memories came back, and that healing path that leads us back into the heart. But Nico, as I call him, he started appearing like being in meditation on a daily basis, and this was, I don't know, this has been ongoing, chronic, on and off for some time. And I said, what do I call you? And I heard that, oh, Nicodemus in my head, and just call me that, because the names are just like a light signature, or they're not necessarily a name that an English name. So he gave me that as a reference point for my human self, right? And I had to look this up. Who was Nicodemus? Like, he was a figure in the Bible, but he was also like a black man in the U.S. who, I think maybe it was Oklahoma or Kansas or something. He led slaves to freedom, like leading
Oh,
the beings to freedom.
oh,
So
I got
what was part of
goosebumps.
our yeah, what was part of the journey on our ship? Well, leading beings who have been kind of the underdogs or forsaken in some way or had their home worlds blown up, leading them into safety. So anyway, and we could talk about the concept of, what's a commander? A lot of times in our frame of reference here on Earth would be like somebody who rules. But in this case, Nico is a frequency harmonizer. He keeps the ship and the crew and everybody in balance through frequency. I mean, it's a beautiful way of assuming that role that is very not hierarchical in nature. So yeah,
Wow, wow. And what does he look
yeah.
like? How tall is he?
He is maybe a little taller than human, than our usual. He might be maybe be 6'5" or something. And I see him. His skin is purpley brown. Um, And there's something aquatic about his history that I don't quite. If you said what planet or planet star system is that, I don't know that I know. So I can't tell you that. But in my vision, he appears as kind of a black man. But there's some other sort of webbing and things that I can't quite, you know, put my finger on or describe very well. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
But very gentle presence, and I've in some ways he's come back as like a safe masculine, or even like a father figure, in a way. Yeah,
I love that. What does the
yeah.
ship look like that he frequences
Oh,
and harmonizes?
yes, thank you. Well, I would say it's polymorphous, so it can look a little different at different times depending on the atmosphere we're moving through, or it can be cloaked, or it's very organic and alive. The ship is alive. It's not, we would think, again, human frame of reference, clunky, maybe like riveted air, like an airplane or a metal thingy, but it's all like a living, breathing, almost like a skin. Um, I always, in my memory, my vision, it's always like these, like pastel colors almost, as it appears to me. And that could be because it's upper vibrational or upper dimensional. Um, Yeah, so it has like portals, or I don't know if I would call them jump gates, but portals into other uh, like bookmarks in space-time, or like you could go back to a homeworld of one of the crew easily through that, or using one of the pods that are like a med bed on steroids or something. So pods where, that heal, or bring people into harmony, or they're vibrationally, everything's based on frequency, energy, and vibration, So such is the case that it's just the pods are like fractals of the ship in a way.
You mentioned that Nicodemus feels more like a father figure to you, and bearing in mind your physical Earth family were horrific. That's a nice way of putting it. Horrifically cruel and abusive to you and your brother. Do you remember having a mother figure on the ship with Nicodemus?
No, but I love that you bring that up, because mother figures that are not from this realm, from other lifetimes and other races, have come in to help me heal so much, and that's been like, oh, even now, I'm 53, I still partake of being like, it's almost like being nursed by these higher level, like almost divine mother energies. There's so many of them. The first that came back were, I just call them mother and father. They are indigenous. You know, Parents from my lifetime with the Crow people in the 19th century, and they're still around, but they were very instrumental, years ago, when I was really, really kind of a mess with all these memories having returned, and dealing with PTSD and panic attacks, and that they were there. So yes, there's also been that, though not on the ship, the mothering figures, so to say, counterpart to Nicodemus. No, not in my recollection, but throughout my journey, absolutely yes. There's been so many benevolent beings, loving energies that have surrounded and supported me. So, and I know that it can be easy when we've been through these difficult experiences to let anything in, because we've been so traumatized, being unprotected and really unsafe with other humans and non-humans. So it's been beautiful to be able to, discern who's got my interest at heart. And after all these years, really, really move back through meditation and the journey I've made into the heart space, and embrace what's coming in. I'm a work in progress, but to be able to receive the goodness is also part of the healing process. Yeah.
Mm. With Dulcie Base, I heard that there had been huge cleanups and improvements because so
Yeah.
many people have now shared the truth and the reality of that horror farm and all the hidden abuses and tortures there on great
Mhm.
men and women and children. And so they've made it look like, oh, nothing to see here. It's all changed, a new kind of management in place. Can you tell us a bit more about the size of the facility, how deep the underground base goes, and if it links to the magnetic levitation trains?
Oh, yeah. Does it link to the maglev? I don't, that's a great question. So when I was there, I mean, I was so little. This is like 4 or 5 years old. So I was never brought, in these programs as a child, you don't own yourself. You don't have a need to know anything at all. Nothing about anything. So I was in the dungeon area and it was just dark in there. And I don't know, it seemed enormous. It seemed at first the enormity was reckoned in my child's mind and in my adult memory related to, the German base seemed huge. And then I realized, oh, it's contiguous with, in a way, Dulce. Again, just at the time that I was there. So I don't know how deep or if it was, I never saw any maglev, but it might have been. I don't know. I remember really keeping my head down and being kind of frozen when our human nervous system goes into shutdown at a certain extent where we cannot process anymore. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn are some of our typical responses, trauma patterns, So I was really frozen in there and just hoping not to make eye contact, doing what I was told. I was drugged, in part is how they made us compliant for lots of things, partly through drugging. But I don't have good recollection of like measurements of the facility or anything from that vantage point.
Mm. When you were twinned with the little boy Dean, did you do missions with him when you were older? Because you were being
Yeah,
obviously fracked and fractured to do. Can you
yeah.
share a little bit about the missions that you and Dean were on?
Yeah, so we were built out as super soldiers over kind of painstaking time. They invest a lot into their abductees, so to say. And this was, again, incorporating US military interests, among others, and some regressive ET elements. We did missions on Mars together. And a lot of, over the years, some of our training was just to be, patrolling the bases on Mars, which could be boring on some days, like no big thing, which is great. Our human nervous systems probably needed some downtime from all of this. But some of our psychic recon, we worked with a small unit, usually only seven, maybe nine of us, but pretty small. And Dean and I were doing the psychic looking, so we could say now remote viewing. We would be looking at the mantid caverns, the mantid labyrinth, as I call it, on Mars, that was kind of near the base that we had, and wanting to understand some of its technology and how we could co-opt more of the mantids to work for us on the base. Yeah. There was a lot that went on with that. The mantids in this group that I recall were very spiritual in nature. We wanted nothing to do with harming us, but we were trained, to be quite honest, to use them as target practice. Um, yeah.
God. Now, can you
So
describe the mantid to us?
yeah, tall, tall, wiry, greenish. But also in my memory, there's a lightness to some of them. The ones on Mars had structured in this sort of, the grouping had a kind of unity consciousness or a collective mind. And so that was again governed by frequency. Frequency, their elders, as I call them, I remember them wearing almost like a kind of robe. I've made drawings of this. And they, again, like Nicodemus, in a way, held the group together harmoniously through frequency. Um, yeah, so they were, I feel them as very light on their feet, dexterous with their, I don't know, call them hands. They were like the mandibles here. What do you call this? I don't know what you call them. It's not a hand.
Like
But
claws or clasps,
yeah. There's somebody who knows bugs.
pincers,
Step in.
pincers,
Yeah.
the crab.
Very, but and yet not a facsimile of a little mantid we would see on Earth, or just something different about them. Had a kind of quiet resonance in their signature, energy signature. Um, Big eyes, of course, big eyes, and kind of yeah, they do have that little thing like that. And I remember waking up after some surgical procedure on Mars and having these two mantids over me, and they looked at each other. It was kind of, if there was a humorous moment in my experience, this was it, because they looked at each other, and it was almost like reading their minds, like they wondered if they had messed up, which is kind of funny for that's kind of a human thing to feel or think, yeah. And in this case, it was the mantids. Did we fuck this up?
Wow.
So Yeah, so the mantids, there's a long saga with all the things with the mantids, and they became through almost like, again, trauma-based mind control we spoke of. We were doing it to the mantids to get them to work for us, co-opting them through their frequency to become our surgeons, our mechanics, and our techs. Yeah, so that's kind of how that worked.
Good
Mm-hmm.
heavens. So you mentioned the mantid labyrinth that is on Mars, which naturally exists there. So assuming they're an indigenous species to Mars as far as you're aware?
Well, so with a caveat, so again, in human frame of reference, they've been on Mars so long we could call them native. But if you go back farther, we'll learn that they were actually migrants here from elsewhere. But it's so far gone. Like they lived in. Why do I say that? They lived in this the labyrinth, as I don't have another word for it, that had been left by a very highly advanced group that built stuff all over the solar system. They left it there as it's a technology, a high frequency technology. These it's like the inner caverns were like crystalline in structure, in almost like some off-world kind of material that I don't have a language to describe, but that was a long answer to your question. But these another person has called them as ancient builders. I would call them ancient engineers and architects and artists. They left stuff everywhere, and they were very tall by the looks of what they left behind. And the mantids moved in at a certain point. I have no idea what era of what we call time that might have been, and made it their own. And it was protected by what we could call a frequency fence. And if you were not of a certain frequency, you couldn't get beyond the fence. And our commanders at the base would have us go over. We got wise to this, because we could be killed. Our clone could be killed going into that because we weren't, of a high vibration ourselves, but we were trying to unlock its technology. Or the missions they gave us were sometimes cover missions. We didn't always know what we were getting ourselves into, and that was by design. Somebody else has said that the Mars bases at this time were run by psychopaths, and my experience kind of bears that out. I would say that there's a truism to that. And I think a lot of this, like we mentioned, Dulce, things have changed. I always say I was in the cesspool of the programs. I think a lot has changed since then. And this was a very experimental time, a rich time for certain agencies in space to be experimenting with weaponized humans and what we call building out super soldier, getting into transhumanism, and the agenda of a completely controllable slave race.
Hmm. So many ways to go here. There are people that believe that the main Mars base or city or metropolis that apparently is above and below ground was known as Ares Prime. Does this bear true for what you understand? Having actually
Again,
been.
I don't know the name. Yeah, I've heard that name spoken by others, but I can't say I was there or not there. I don't know.
No, I
I
appreciate.
never saw any papers about what it was called.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm. I have a theory that I can't prove, like most things that we talk about in this regard, that we can't all have the physical proof for. But because of the psychopathy of the billionaires and millionaires that trade us for their pleasure, I believe that there are several that actually don't live on planet Earth. They're actually, going between Jupiter and Mars, and
Yeah.
that's my own. Okay, you're nodding like yes, because people are saying like, oh, well, how come, they're spraying the skies aluminium or aluminum, as Americans and Canadians call it, and strontium and barium and these multiple metals and microscopic levels to mess with our upper respiratory and really harm us, and then create antenna that will magnetize and respond to, outside stimuli, let's say towers, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, well, there's your answer, because they're not breathing in the air. They're attacking the planet to harm as many of us as they can. So, what is your understanding of that?
Well, I do always say that the spiritual war on our planet is in part fought through the air, the food, and the water. So, and just to that point, but what was the question about the
Yeah, do you think there
Freak.
are like the mega billionaires and millionaires who've
Oh,
enslaved parts of the military? They own the military, parts of the military, they own parts of the government, they own the presidencies, fuckers at the top, these evil ding-dongs. They just amuse themselves. Très amusé, très rigolo. It's so funny how they, mess with humanity, my brothers and my sisters, till I'm standing in front of one of them and kicking them in the balls. But apart from that, yeah, do you believe that they are living off planet, living lives? They're not just living in bunkers here on planet Earth. That's just nonsense to me. What do you
oh,
believe?
the wealthy upper echelon. Yeah. At
Yes.
this point, yeah, they're not all here on Earth. They are not all here on Earth. I remember, in fact, of course, my experiences on Mars go back decades, as we said, at least in linear terms in time. But there was I practice remote viewing in the way where you use an alphanumerical, identifier for what you're looking at. And I practice online with online pools of data. And I was feeling into this psychically, like, what is this thing I'm looking at? And to make a long story short, it was, oh, I had all these things describing what was it? Oh, it was one of the moons of Mars. And there were people in it. It was busy. There was a long way of saying, like, I think that Mars in some ways has been really built out. Some of our systems have been colonized for a very long time, and not just, of course, not just by other beings, but by, some of these, yeah, at this point in time, humans. I don't know that that was true back then, but in this moment, as much as anything is true, there has been a flight, let's say, from the earth and its poisons for those who can and those who, like you said, control part of what's going on here.
My thinking about the situation that we're in, and because of recent very bad behaviors that I have witnessed with certain personnel, that the element of the solar system that we're aware of, as much as we're told what the solar system is and how many planets there are, etc., most of it's bullshit, but what we have been given limited access to, I believe that the solar system is also part of the matrix. You alluded to the fact that the ancient mantids took over a labyrinth of sorts on Mars that was created, physically created by other beings in this solar system. Tony Rodriguez talks about having his consciousness extracted in a secret space program, put into another being that could survive an environment where these beings were literally building stars. And I am bringing Tony back soon, and we are going to talk about this, because there are things now that we must flesh out that people still have an issue hearing, but they must hear them if they really want to know the reality of the world and the worlds, and what I think is an entirely constructed matrix, not just Earth. I think that a lot of the aliens are stuck in this as well. I think they're stuck. And I think that's why, like when you hear about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, the Galactic Federation of Light, Galactic Federation of Aliens, I think they're much controlled as we are. And I think the prime directive, the Star Trek, the universal law, I think it's bullshit. That's my own human perspective. May I
Yeah.
get yours, please? And if anyone's offended, I'm fine with that out there. I don't care, because we got to start having these honest conversations. Stop worrying about offending people. I am so beyond that. I'm light years ahead of that. So, and if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. But Rebecca, please give us your truth and your insight, and correct me if I'm
Mm.
wrong.
Yeah. Well, I'm a human and I don't know all there is to know. I base, I can only speak to what I've called my, family on the Light Alliance ship. I don't know about all there is to know about the Galactic, those that call themselves the Federation of Worlds or otherwise. I think there have been groups and counter groups and subterfuge and, the real groups and the fake groups and, people that get overtaken and think they're channeling this when it's really this. And, the other reason why we need to stay at the heart level and the heart frequency so we can become clear messengers of what wants to come through us as humans. Yeah, so again, I can't, I don't have the final word on that, or my expression is just based on what I can tell you about Nico and the ship and my experience on it as an upper dimensional galactic myself. So yeah, it's a quagmire when we get into, who's doing this and who's that and what's right and what's not. Yeah, I think there's different timelines of different information on them, and which one are we going into? And there's been a lot of bait and switch and a lot of, false agents coming into this community. So that's all there. Not all of them are human. Yeah.
Yeah, not all of them are human. Yeah, so true. Yeah, so interesting. And again, people are so worried about upsetting others, and not. I don't set out to do that. I'm here for the truth, and I don't care
Mm.
who it is that has been dishonest or who's telling the truth. We need it fleshed out. We need it proven. We need physical evidence. And people that bring drama and cause division, I think maybe need to do some heart work. But I think there's always room for improvement for every single person. And I
For
think,
all of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
for all of us, we're all, like you said, you're a work in progress. I'm
Mhm.
definitely a work in progress.
That's
Definitely.
I think that's the human journey too. Like if we talk
Yeah.
about what did you even come here for? Well, it's to explore the banquet of this realm and all its dysfunction and all its beauty and magnificence. Those exist in tandem. We are in, what we call classically polarity, duality
Yeah.
here on Earth. Yeah, so so true.
Yeah,
Hmm.
amazing. I wrote a couple of things down here as well. You mentioned the crow people. You said the crow people came in at a time when you were extremely vulnerable, remembering memories because you were going into deep meditation. Can you tell me who the crow people are for you and what they look
Yeah.
like and how they did kind of come in at the right time and what happened?
Yeah, yeah, beautiful story there. Wow, my heart lights up. Um,
Mm.
I didn't know anything about the Crow people or any of this before I was out on a hike, walking in the watershed where I lived at the time, and I think it was father that appeared on my right. This tall indigenous man, wearing skins and beaded stuff and like kind of a little bit classical, looking as far as a indigenous man from the 19th century, and then shortly after, minutes later down the trail along the creek there, mother shows up on my left, like again, very classical, right side of the body. Father shows up, the masculine side, the left side, the feminine side, and over the intervening and ensuing days and weeks, I learned the story of them and that I had had an incarnation with them. I didn't place them at first. I had no idea who they were. And I was a little, resistant or reluctant, like, who are you? Why do you want to help me? I've been through a lot at this point. Like, are you good? Are you not good? But their energy was very, very clearly a benevolent signature that I trusted. So later on, I learned that they revealed that they had died, and it was fever, and there was fever that swept through the Crow people, Absaroka tribes, are present day Montana. Um, and their medicine, their energy lives on there. So this was around the 1860s. Mother's a little shorter and has come to me at times as a very old woman. She's come to me almost because we're talking about quantum space time. Has come to me as more middle aged, and then also as a somehow as a even though they died. Didn't reach maturity in their incarnation. I see her as very old, and that could just be a psychic signature, metaphorically, of great wisdom, but very nurturing. Like she would hold me and kind of protect me and help me in a way. So I had to do some deep diving on that and like listen hard, listen to what they had to share with me. Who were they? Where were they from? Who were these beings that I had no, not immediate recognition of? Amazing too, because we can live incarnations and absolutely, amnesia. We could talk about amnesia about our experiences in abduction scenarios like the SSP, but also just this more simple and basic, if you like, conversation around other lifetimes, right? We can forget everything. So I would say, in a backhand way, all this gave me access to that which I would not have had cause to dig into if it weren't for all of this. That's one way. That's one way to pivot perspective on it, I suppose. Yeah,
I'm so happy that there were people that brought you comfort in such a difficult life on many
yeah.
different levels. It's so beautiful, and that you have full recall of them. You mentioned earlier, and if this, you do not have to answer this question, of course, but
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier that your dad passed away in 2025, and this dad was clearly monstrous in many ways. to you and your brother. Did you see him at the end of life? Did you have conversations?
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah. And I would say, um, he was the parent I actually favored. And he wasn't, I want to say, what I'm getting at is I think he was quite controlled by his handlers because he worked with a top secret, clearance at a very high level over, a lifetime career of that. So he was handled in very specific ways by his own dark groomers, within the deep state in certain ways. So his death, to your question here, I actually had a premonition. My memories didn't really start coming in until he was in the last year or two of life. He was dying, and I went to be with him, and a lot was revealed on his deathbed. He told me that, I said, "Where were you going all those years? You were traveling so much. Where were you going?" And that was that point he said, "Oh, I was reporting back to XYZ Alphabet Agency and the headquarters in Langley, and I'm going farther afield to do these things. It's been over 40 years. I suppose I can talk about these things." He was, among other things, he was a brilliant mind and an engineer and an aeronautical engineer, formally, with high level abilities, not a lot of emotional capacity, but yeah, so mixed bag with dad, right? He was a safer parent in my childhood than my mother was. But they both came from traumatized backgrounds themselves. See how this passes on. What are we bequeathing the children of this planet? Yeah, so just to clarify, a lot of memories about space started coming back as he started to pass. Why is that? Every time a perpetrator or somebody very seminal in my experiences passes away, I get memory back. So that's been the case with people in extended family. My godfather, my mother is the last remaining. She's almost 90. So it's so interesting how things started to open up, whether I wanted them to or not at that time. And it was really, I want to say, if people are like, "How did you start to remember this?" There were pieces and parts that I knew my whole life and really sat in a solid, firm foundation of denial about, because they did not fit in with my story of how this world works or my place within it. Yeah. But sooner or later, you have to start running and look at it. At least I did, because my life was so painted into a corner. In the area of Dulce, I was hit by a car, had a head injury. I was a almost semi-professional cyclist at the time. I was an athlete. That's how I kind of dealt with my pain. I had a concussion and all. When I came back from that, this was again 2012. It was like I'd been handed a zip disk with the fracturing in my head, that had all this stuff on, all this foreign experience. And it was like I was given it. And I started to meditate because I didn't have any other, card in my pocket to play. That was the last hand. I'm going to sit on this cushion, start a meditation practice, and get my life back. And what happens when you sit in silence with yourself? Your subconscious starts giving you a lot of information. That was it in my case. All my psychic ability also came back, but so did a lot of memory. So I credit it to the opening of my recall, in many ways, to the head injury and meditation. And to this day, I'm a daily meditator. I've done a lot of work just through the practice of sitting and working with the breath and the space from which all things arise and into which all things dissolve. So it's given me a lot of equanimity and also given me a tremendous amount of resource. Yeah.
That's just amazing. There's so often people that share a pivotal moment. Often it's a violent happening, an accident. I just today was with my beautiful friend Beverly Rhodes. Have you met Beverly yet?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's just incredible. She did 320 in backs, and I went to see her at Miles Johnston's UK bases conference a few weeks ago.
Oh,
I've
okay.
known
Yeah.
her a while.
Yeah.
She's been on my channel loads of times. Her information is incredible. She didn't get back her memories of SSP and other until she had or was caught up in a terrorism act when the London
Wow.
Underground was bombed and the underground trains were bombed, and she was on one of those trains. And then she had such a serious head injury and smashed all her jaw. and was laying on the ground in the dark with other people. Some had died somewhere. I mean, it was just horrendous. That
Wow.
moved, that, yeah, moved her to like the zip file, the like, oh my gosh, wow, the awakening,
Mm.
the moment. Don't know if you can hear, but it is absolutely raining and storming
Raining
here.
so hard.
Can
Yes,
you
I can hear
hear
it a little
it?
bit.
It's
Just a tiny bit.
crazy. Wow.
Wow.
Earlier it was snowing. It was, yeah,
Mm.
England. I'm sitting here in a, like, woo, it's got cold. I'm like, I'm not going to just be sitting here all pretty. I'm like, it's bloody freezing. Again, we got to
Oh,
be honest, right? Just no matter what we're doing, no matter who we're speaking to, be ourselves. Always be in the present moment, have the awareness, and, just be honest. Um, but yeah, it reminds me, like I say, of Beverly and her awakening. So let me ask you this. If you look around what people call the community, like I'm for humanity, but people like to put themselves in a group name so they can feel connected to something, and I do understand that and I do respect that. But when I
mm.
say about me, I'm just like, I'm here like observing everyone, everything, and in doing what I feel is my part in helping and loving and supporting in the many ways that I do and have done over these years, with my own memories also of angels, demons, and ETs from different places and different levels of frequency, from dark to very, very light. My question is, are there people that you recognize who are speaking out about their experiences that you may have met, that you remember from the programs that you were in?
I want to say yes, but not with great certainty. So I can't really, that's a slippery one. A lot of
Yeah.
people, so I want to say that I've had people come to me and say, yes, I remember you from this, this, and this. But to me, I don't always remember faces very well or names. That's not my greatest strength. So I can't say with great fidelity, whether or not I remember. And, to my credit, I would say as we're built out and weaponized, we're so traumatized. Like, if it could be true that they remember me and I don't remember them, absolutely, I have an alibi. Like, there's a lot going on in the program. So, and we are also programmed not to remember,
Yes.
of course. So there's definitely a lockdown on that. Yeah. I think it would be comforting if I could say, yes, I remember XYZ, this person that has told their story that I know. The only person's Dean. He came to me psychically, and yeah, he's troubled. In any case, I wish that I had a yes to that, because it would be like, oh, you know, I
Mm.
remember that piece, but no.
I was going to ask you about Dean. I can see it's obviously upsetting because you had
Hmm.
that twinning connection to him. I was going to ask you if he made it, if he's still physically here, if you met up
He's
after.
alive in the Northeast, and it's a great question. And for a while, I was connected to him psychically, not meeting in person, but his life, it was like he wasn't, what I read there is not like, of course, he's not doing great because all these experiences have piled up and piled up. And as we get older, our untended trauma tends to erupt, in unpleasant ways. And I feel like he's emboweled in work and family things and not like facing that and not doing great. That's how, in some ways, he has come to me. His higher self has also come to me, but he is still living. He's on the east, in the Northeast, and who I don't necessarily wax nostalgic tremendously about that connection, because it was based on happened in cages in an underground base. We were kept cold, naked, and electrocuted and starved. I don't necessarily need to go back into, reclaiming that relationship. Although my heart reaches with empathy and compassion and care for both of us and all the kids in the situation. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bless your heart. Can I ask you if you remember from being taken from Earth to the moon on a German or American or reptilian craft? Can you remember the different crafts? And can you tell us how long it took? Do you have a memory of the time it took from Earth to the moon?
It was fast. It was fast. And I always remember going to from my bed, being abducted. There were, insectoid beings involved with those abductions that were pretty frequent. I talked about sleep paralysis and being muted and all the crazy things. I'd be taken to what I call the bus stop underground. I'm not exactly sure what that base was. It may have been Langley. And then from there, there was a kind of, I want to call it probably the propulsion system was a warp drive because it was like I was being strapped into something over my shoulders to accommodate rapid velocity through space. Yeah. But I don't remember what it looked like from the outside. It's almost like we kind of came in from below the craft, entering, so you wouldn't see the enormity of it or have any, I don't have visuals of that. And it always seemed like it was in darkness. But it was quick. It wasn't like, oh, I have to take all this time to get to the moon. It was like, boom. But it did seem to me, we can talk about, was a consciousness taken or was a body taken? It always seemed like my body was going somewhere. My body was gone from the bed. It was actually physically gone for X amount of Earth hours. That's all I recall about that. And the presence of beings, not craft, that frightened me, mostly non-human, or beings that didn't seem to have souls, were not fully engaged sympathetically with their humanity.
Mm-hmm. This gives me so interesting. Choking on the question. See that?
Oh,
um,
hmm.
so a couple of things. So you mentioned insectoids would come and do the abduction. So I want to describe a group of insectoids I saw once flying over Camp Pendleton. So I was driving my car, the window was open a little bit, and I was living in San Diego, Coronado Island, where there's also a nuclear massive submarine base. Half the island is that. So I'm going through Camp Pendleton, it's pitch black, no lights whatsoever. If you didn't know, the left-hand side was just miles and miles of mountains with an underground base, military base, massive. And the other side of the road is the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. If you didn't know the base was there, you'd just be in this dark, random place. So I'm driving along, there's traffic in front of me, not much, and all of a sudden I see countless green lights. So I think, oh, helicopters, military base, I'm so used to seeing the war
Yeah.
machines. But they were moving, and I got this feeling. So I called out telepathically. I went, I can see you. Oh my God, Rebecca. They stopped. They froze. And then a few
Mm.
went to huddle and they buzzed. And then one of them went boom. And it's right by the car. Oh my God, it moved so quick. And it looked
Wow.
like, yeah, it was almost the size of my car. And it was like a wasp, a wasp or a skinny bee, and it had these dangly legs and kind of green and yellow stripes, and I could hear it zzz, very, very low
Wow.
hum, and I was like, "Oh my God, oh my God, I'm so scared! Please go away, go away, go away!" I shit myself, and then it went zoop straight back, and I was like, "What the hell was that?" And I felt like, I felt intuitively like these bugs, whatever you call them, were witnessing something over. I felt like they were there. It was almost like I felt like they were protecting something. It didn't feel malicious to me. And I didn't
Yeah.
feel that the base had control. This was in 2004. I didn't feel the
Okay.
military base had control over these beings. But I wonder if you've seen what I'm describing.
I haven't, but I'm rather rapt as you describe that and you talk about that experience. Wow. 20 years on from, um, I I want to say that there can be some confusion about when we say insectoids, some people will think loving energy, some people will think terrible, like malicious energy. And there are different groups that have suffered different things, different dimensional expressions of different insectoid races. So, yes, there's goodness out there in the insectoid realms. They often say we can't work with humans because they're too afraid of us. So, but that makes sense. I think did I hear you say that you felt like they were watching something?
Yeah.
Is that right? That they were kind of keeping tabs on something and maybe,
Yes.
is something down here getting out of hand at the base? What do we need to
Yeah.
know?
That's what it
Um,
felt like.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you
that's
know what
really
it's like.
fascinating.
When you're in a moment of sheer terror, which I was, I regretted instantly. Well, I don't now, but at the time I was like, oh my God, when I reached out to them, because I've done that before and other things have happened. I don't recommend doing it on a plane. That is the scariest thing ever, but that's a whole other story. But when I did that, when the being came and it was by the car as I'm driving along, going, oh my God, I'm so sorry, please go, please go. In that sheer moment of panic where you don't know, you're kind of in that, in the limbic system's going off, your senses are
Yes.
going off, and but yeah, I felt like they were benevolent, they were there, they were caring, they were, because you're in a moment of terror, your brain has the capacity to think 1,000 thoughts and feel a million
Yeah.
feelings. And then we remember we have the ability to recall in the mind what happened, as you know. And yeah, it was just incredible. It was just incredible. Um, you mentioned that when you were taken to the moon, you were some kind of backpack or battery pack and you're moving at a velocity. My friend Alex Collier has often spoken about the density belt with the Andromedans that's helped him move through densities, or when he was taken on a craft, he'd be wearing one. Would that be something similar for you, a density belt?
Gosh, I not that I know of, but I don't, doesn't mean it's not a thing. I don't have direct memory about that, such a belt. But yes, I'm sure those things also exist. So many different technologies existed over so much of human time, human years. So many different things developed over the decades with all of this and different ways that they, you know, government and military working with different races, both positive and negative, gathering technologies. There's so much available to us at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I want to share with you, as we're on this subject of technology, that it works in the reverse, and I know this for a fact because when I was living in Hawaii, there was one day I was coming out the kitchen, and right in front of me across the room was this little guy, and a little ET, and I named him Gary the Guard. There's a fly in here, Gary the Guard. He was this little guy, and he was literally he had a glass space helmet, completely see through. And again, when you look at someone, you're in that moment and you scan and you read instantly. Us humans are so brilliant, we're able to do that. And I looked at him, and he was shocked because he realized I could see him. For a minute, Gary was uncloaked, and Gary was inside my house by the back glass doors, patrolling like inside the house. He had huge eyes. His hair was like tentacles, long tentacles, and they sat in purple fluid at the base of this glass helmet. And as I looked at him, I knew that that liquid was some kind of acid that he needed from whatever
Oh,
environment yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
but the suit he was wearing was a big fat spaceman suit. It was a big padded white spaceman suit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so what is the recognition there that you have as I share that story?
Yeah, just that, when I was nodding, it's like, oh yeah, so this environment, the third density here on Earth particularly, is not easy for upper dimensional beings to just, appear and form within this reality. Because sometimes people say, well, why don't they just come? It's like, well, they can come more easily through psychic means if are inclined in that direction and have your inner vision tapped into. But they can't just all, pop down in. Or for some groups or beings, it's easier, and for some people, they've got the suit with the acid and the that, because and it's a denser environment down here. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's incredible. God, there's so many different ways to go. There's so much to ask you about. Do you know what I would absolutely love to do? And again, to get to spend more time with you. Last time we spoke together, we talked a lot about Mars and the reptilians and the things that happened and you escaping and then being taken. The
Yeah,
story,
yeah.
the experiences are just so vast. And I think if we could invite the audience to ask questions in the comments section that we could cover, because the
Mm.
audience that come, the beautiful, educated, sweet, loving people that come to my channel, I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I know though there are some who are awakening to their own memories, and I'm sure that what you're sharing is going to help and allow and peak, and they would want to ask more questions. So may we invite
Yeah.
them to ask you
Mhm.
questions, but also next time you come back, that we can cover more of your
Yeah.
experiences on Mars, because I don't
Mhm.
want to rush that. Do you want
Yeah,
you
there's so much. It's tricky
so
with an
much?
hour, hour and a half. Of course, it's going to be like, okay, we need to have you back because there's so much here. Absolutely. Yes.
Definitely, definitely.
Mhm.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. So yeah, we're nearly at an hour and a half. So that would
Yeah.
be beautiful to look forward to that and give the audience time to sort of percolate the information
Yeah, and
and then
thanking
come
you and
up.
your audience for just metabolizing all of this. I'll bring this into Mother, because she and Father have been mentioned, my parents from the Crow people. She has said the wound belongs to all of us. If one person in the tribe has experienced something, it really belongs to everyone. And our collective is so burdened in some ways with grief that, as we tell our stories, it's like we're all processing so we can get out of this quagmire and into a more harmonious vibrational state, right? Yeah, so I appreciate everybody for kind of holding the space for this to come through, and also you for having me.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm so delighted to see you. It's been so long, and I'm so happy that we're connected and we have our beautiful private, heart connection, and to share your experiences. It's truly an honor. There are so many people out there, and you seem to have such a long-term recall of many of the different years, decades, and layers of the program or programs that you went
Yeah.
through. Compared to some people who are still in the realm
Yeah.
of remembering, you know what I mean? And God love them all,
Well,
bless them all.
yeah, I feel like present tense, that it's been imperative that I kind of go toward it and learn all I can about it. When I realized it was part of the soul mission for me to come in and do this, by God, I will plumb the depths and not give up. I also have a Scorpio moon. I think it contributes a little bit to that nature in me is like, steady on, we're going into the rabbit hole and we're not coming out until we get everything we need.
Oh God. Oh my goodness.
So, so it's just been something I've needed to do. It's almost like going back down into the underworld and then gathering the gifts as well as sure, all the shit, but also all the luminosity. And this is true for everybody out there. When we turn toward what's happened to us, it becomes our teacher. And I had to become a student to all of this to become well. That's true for everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
Mhm.
may we invite people to connect to you? You're still seeing clients and working with one-to-one clients. So how would
I
they do
am
this?
deeply transformative work in the one-to-one clients, also group sessions and things that I offer. So you can check it out at RebeccaRoseBarfoot.com. Maybe we can link that below. And if people want to get into the full nitty-gritty details, go to my YouTube channel, Sirius Blue. The Bringing Light to the Darkness series is humbling. It's been out there, 21 episodes on now that people can check out if they want to do that. But yeah, certainly happy to work with people and come back and chat about things with you.
I
Thank you
love
so
it.
much.
Oh my God, thank you so much. And so it was Sirius Blue on YouTube, which is your YouTube channel, and it was
Yeah, YouTube and
Rebecca.
Telegram have the same Rebecca Rose, Sirius Blue on both those platforms. Yeah,
Okay, and then Rebecca Rose Barfoot as your other as
.com. Yeah,
your website, and I will put
that's
the
the website.
details. Yeah, I will put
Yeah,
details underneath, but sometimes people, they still miss it, bless them, you know what I mean? There's so
I
much
get it.
to
Yes.
think
Yeah.
about here. Yes, it's nice to repeat it. All right, my love, well, is there any messages that you would like to leave with the audience here and those on their journey of their own recovery?
Delwane dali boniati shimi korbaniana kima akuyam. Yarona dima koreano. Mora no korbaniani shimi kikia no ronianta in shimi kukima. Nikarana la wante kimi ki ngira don mane alante gasho. Be who you came here to be, not somebody else. Everybody has a story to tell. And yours is important. Everybody cares what you've been through. You're not alone. Ooh, that was that fluttery in my emotional field there.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah,
Oh my God, I felt that too. Everyone care, people, we care what you've been through. That's what you
yeah.
said. Everyone cares what you've been through. And we do, and it does
Mhm.
matter, and everybody has been through something. Even
Yeah.
people that we might deem are a bit naughty or a bit, off track, or it's all right. I think if
Yes.
we're honest, we don't have every answer. We don't have
Yeah.
to hold that cause to be a leader of any kind. We came back, there's a collective of us. We came back to stand together, to hold each other, to be all of those different parts, to heal our planet together. And the one head and the Godhead and it doesn't work. That patriarchy or matriarchy, it
Yeah.
doesn't work, does it? So I'm so happy that you're here. And again, with you, it's like over the time when I've seen you on YouTube, I can always feel my heart. I can always feel
Mhm.
your heart through the screen. We have to remember that we're all energy. And there are few people that I've met in my lifetime that have this feeling I get with you. There are few people that I've met that I feel whatever magic is within you, whatever this depth of love and humility and compassion that you hold. There are few that I've met that embody this, is what I'm trying to say. Using a million words, sorry about that, but I couldn't, it's not easy to express all the time, is it? That
Yeah.
we get these
Thank
feelings
you so
about.
much. Yeah, it's a product of meditation, and I feel like we all, at our core, everybody has this in them. Yeah, so thank you for that beautiful reflection. Yeah.
Brilliant. Rebecca, thank you so much. I love you so much.
Yeah, we'll see you guys again.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye, my lovely. Oh my goodness. And to you guys out there, thank you for being here. I know you're going to be delighted to see Rebecca. Leave your questions in the comment section, not the live chat. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Rebecca.